What's up YouTube, I'm Mike, and today we're talking about Bob and how he likes to do steroids. I cannot do steroids because they're illegal in my country, but this is Bob and he does steroids. Now I know right out the gate there's going to be some asshole in the comment section who's like, wait a minute, Bob looks like identical to you. And I have to admit, the resemblance is uncanny. But as the comedian Tim Minchin said, in a universe or a world with billions of possibilities, things that have like a 1 in a million chance of happening happen all the time. So let's not get caught up in the uncanny resemblance that Bob and I have. Bob likes to do steroids, I don't. So Bob decided that he was going to do a test Deca and Dbol cycle to see what kind of gains he was getting. This is going to be a bulking cycle. I've had a couple people in the comment section tell me that I wasn't clear about the cycles that I chose to do and why I did them. I kind of thought it was obvious that like a 500 milligram test cycle is probably a bulking cycle, but maybe I'm wrong. So Bob decided to do a bulking cycle, and he decided that he was going to use a Dbol Kickstarter at 30 milligrams a day, 10 in the morning, 10 pre-workout, and 10 in the evening. And then he was going to run Deca at 400 milligrams per week and test at 600 milligrams per week because he had read that it was necessary to keep your test higher than your Deca if you don't want to get the dreaded Deca Dick symptoms. So this is what Bob set out to do some time ago. I'm going to put some pictures up on the screen later of Bob's starting point and midpoint and end point so that we can see, we can look at exactly how productive this cycle is. But out the gate, I just want to talk about how Bob felt at various points in his cycle. Bob seems to have liver issues, and so he was pretty scared going into this cycle to begin with, knowing that Dbol is relatively liver toxic. So he decided to keep the dose relatively low and then just see how things went. About 2 weeks into his cycle, Bob started noticing a lot of symptoms that were making him very uncomfortable. He had very itchy hands and feet, not so much yellowing in the eyes, but just generally a bad feeling. Bob did not really like Dbol at all, and he was very disappointed about this because Bob had read countless times on various different internet forums that Dbol is a good feeling compound, that it tends to make you feel kind of like Superman, feel good all day, and this was not exactly the experience that Bob had. Bob did feel a bit superhuman in the beginning, lots of intensity. He felt the drug very soon after taking it. Probably within an hour or so, the intensity was rising. He could definitely feel it in the gym. Although he did not see a lot of strength gains like right out the gate. It took several days for the strength gains to start to come on, and then they came on, but were not terribly impressive. And so obviously at the same time he's running the test in the Deca, but the Deca is not going to be kicking in for quite a while, and so like I said, he had hoped that he would be able to use Dbol as a Kickstarter so that he could start feeling something and hopefully making some gains early on in the cycle. But by the 2-week mark, Bob was growing increasingly concerned that his liver was not doing well and decided to pull the plug on the Dbol completely, which is unfortunate because he bought enough for 6-8 weeks minimum. So that's just the way it goes. You can never know when you're running various compounds that you know the person's never run before, how they're going to feel on them, what it's going to be like. And Bob did not like Dbol, unfortunately. So Bob continued to run the Deca and the test cycle, and the next negative thing that he experienced was that the 600 milligrams of test was not enough to offset the Deca Dick symptoms. What Bob noticed was not so much an inability to get an erection, but a significant difficulty maintaining it for any length of time, which for Bob was pretty frustrating because, you know, it's one thing if you can't even get going. It's a full other thing if you have all of this desire and you get in the game and then your coach pulls you halfway through because you're just not getting the job done, you know? Nobody wants to be put, get set on the bench, and this is what Deca can do to you. It will put you on the bench rather quickly, and so that's unfortunate. Bob later learned more about Deca and how it operates and its progestogenic prolactin type effects, and that there are some potential ways of counteracting these effects, but that was not knowledge that he had or anything necessarily that he had going into it. Now that's actually not true. Bob did mention that he was taking Ropinirole for restless leg syndrome, and that Ropinirole is supposed to reduce progesterone levels in the body. And so Bob had hoped that his meager dose of Ropinirole might counteract the Deca effects, and it did not, which is unfortunate because I think that leaves us with stuff like Pramipexole, which people say is not well tolerated, and then Dostanex, I think. I forget the other term for it. Nevertheless, Bob continued running the test in the Deca despite the Deca Dick symptoms, and despite the fact that for whatever reason Bob does not seem to really tolerate 19-Nor drugs very well. He didn't feel phenomenal really throughout the cycle, had some elevated blood pressure, and just I don't know, it was just not the best thing he'd ever felt in life. 600 milligrams of test started kicking in obviously around the 4-week mark, and Bob started seeing some decent strength gains. And then, 6 weeks in, maybe Deca is really starting to flow, and Bob did, by the end of his cycle, enjoy some very, very reasonable gains in strength, putting, 30 pounds minimum on a lot of his lifts. So Bob definitely enjoyed that. And the growth was decent. So one of the things that was interesting for Bob in this cycle is Deca is known to be a wet compound, a compound that tends to put on some bloat, and obviously with test in the mix, you've got 2 wet compounds. Dbol out the gate, you would expect this to be a Michelin Man type of cycle, and Bob is a weird character. He doesn't seem to have problems with water retention so much, and so when we look at the pictures, we'll see that Bob was able to maintain a relatively athletic look from start to finish. So I can't, nothing else that he really mentioned I think that was worth noting at this point. Yeah, that's basically the feeling of the cycle. The Deca Dick was definitely an issue. Generally not loving the feel of the Deca or the 19-Nor drug. Blood pressure obviously a problem. Nothing that was outrageous. I believe he reported highs around the upper 150s over 70 or 80. And so nothing like, morbid, but, certainly higher than you would like to see. So, yeah, that all being said, let's look at some pictures, some before and after images, and we'll just kind of talk about, those as we go. Okay, I'm back. Sorry I couldn't get all that in one day, which explains the wardrobe change. So, now I'm going to show you the beginner images, the progress photos, to show Bob's progress from beginning to end of what is effectively an intermediate steroid cycle. Bob decided to go underground and see what he could get to develop more mass by using underground pharmacology. So I got a couple of images, few images I'm going to go through here. For starters, Bob's starting point at the beginning of this cycle is 168 pounds. And then we'll see what kind of conditioning he stays in and what kind of total weight he gets up to over that period. So he'd been cutting for a period of 12 or more weeks, I don't remember what he said, and lost quite a bit of body fat, and he'd gotten down to these starter images. I'm going to put them on a few screens, so that's why I'm looking off to the side here. So you see in these first 3 images, this image here, Bob's got, some development in his abs, certainly not deep cuts, but, 6 relatively visible abs, kind of soft around the midsection, around the belly button, some decent vascularity, some decent size, but nothing huge. This is definitely not a mass monster. We're looking at 168 pounds at about 5'10". Here in the second image, you can see some of the serratus development, and then again in the third image, just some pictures to show you where we're starting. The abs look a little bit developed, better developed, a little bit cleaner here in this image. Again, some vascularity. Bob's pecs are not one of the more better developed parts of his body. Shoulders are looking decently round. Arms not especially big. So that's our starting point. Now I'm going to move you to a couple of images to show you effectively the 1 month mark. So this first image here, Bob's abs are looking relatively the same as the starter point. Shoulders may be getting a little bit bigger, some decent vascularity again, some detail in the mid pec region, some separation there. Not a whole lot in the way of upper pec development to my eye in this image. Forearms are looking decent and cut. And then in the second image, we're looking at Bob's back, obviously, and Bob's got some decent back and shoulder development. Forearms are looking good. The angle doesn't show us much in the way of lower back. If there is any, looks like we've got a little body fat around the lower back, but pretty good back development to my eye. So again, just to remind you from the beginning of the video, I'm shooting this over a couple of days, so it's hard to remember everything that I said. Bob did not like the D-ball, so he only ran it for about 2 weeks. So this would be effectively 2 weeks of D-ball and then 2 weeks off. I would argue you're probably not going to see a whole lot of anything in the way of tangible gains on such a short cycle of D-ball. If it did anything at all, it was probably very minor and likely only strength related. So this is again the 1 month mark. So you would only just now be expecting the test E to be kicking in. Bob's probably noticing some strength enhancements, maybe a little change to body composition or weight at this point, but the Deca's probably really not doing a whole lot right now. All right, here we are at the 8-week mark in the cycle, and we can see that Bob is starting to develop a little bit of mass. Here in this first picture, which is unflattering for the midsection, just because of the way Bob's kind of leaning forward there, but you can see some better development in the pecs. Shoulders look much rounder to my eye. Vascularity is still very good. You see a little pec separation and just generally more thickness and fullness, definitely in the shoulders and even some in the traps there. Forearm veins and cuts still look good. Abs definitely look a bit softer. Again, I don't know if this is because of the way he sort of leaned over there, but certainly a fullness around the midsection and the belly button, but still, you know, we could call that 4 visible abs, I guess. Excuse me. Here in the second image, we can get a better feel for how much body fat is actually being gained. The lower back still looks pretty lean. Upper back is looking good. More size to my eyes. Looks like, you know, visually we see some changes in the cycle, and that's reflected in the weight gain. So again, Bob started at 168 pounds. By the 1 week mark, he was up around 170-ish, and here we're closer to 174. So we've got body weight that's creeping up slowly over the period of this first 8 weeks, with not really a lot of water or body fat gains. So we're looking at relatively lean mass that's being gained thus far at the 8-week mark. Okay, now here we are looking at the 10-week mark. At this point in the cycle, Bob's strength is definitely come on. He's definitely starting to feel all facets of the cycle, and that's being reflected in his weight changes. So here in this first picture, you see again, Bob is doing a good job of maintaining an athletic look throughout the entire cycle, not putting on a lot of water or body fat gains. The abs still look relatively comparable, maybe even to my eye a little leaner in this picture than the previous. Chest development is looking much thicker. Shoulders are nice and capped and round, still good vascularity, little separation in the upper pecs, and forearms are looking good. The second picture, Bob's trying to hit the most muscular there a little bit, and again we see the development of the upper pecs and the lower pec separation. Shoulders are looking good and cut up. Biceps are looking strong. Vascularity is good. Not a whole lot of weight in the midsection. And then finally here in this last image again, you know, Bob's growing all the way around. Back is looking nice and thick and full. Good cuts in the back. Not a lot as far as body weight or water or anything sitting in the lower back. So at this point in the cycle, Bob's weight, if I remember, he said is somewhere in the 176 to 178 pound range. So and that's effectively where Bob sits in this cycle over the long run, plus or minus some water, body fat changes, body composition. Before we get to the final images, effectively Bob nets himself about 10 pounds in this cycle, and as you'll see in the upcoming images, the gains begin to taper off. And then here we are finally at the 14-week mark. This is the picture you've probably all been waiting for. What did we get to from beginning to end with 600 milligrams of test, 400 milligrams of Deca, and then a short 2-week Dbol Kickstarter, and you get to the 14-week mark, and you look at this picture and you say to yourself, did Bob even cycle? This is not a good image to show. Obviously the lighting and everything, the conditions are completely different with the way this image is shot. You can still see the roundness in the shoulders. It looks like this might have been a post-arm day. Bob's biceps are looking pretty full here. Definitely still lean around the midsection. Again, not a whole lot of change to body composition from beginning to end of the cycle. Certainly we don't see the Michelin Man effect take place. Certainly we don't see Bob get fat and bloated or really gain any discernible body fat at all. So to have gained 10 pounds over the course of a 14-week cycle, you'll have to be the judge of that. 10 relatively lean pounds is what we're looking at here. So again, on the one hand, if you are looking at this cycle from the bro science, from the forums, where they talk about Dbol and Test and Deca being able to put 30 pounds of weight on someone in a relatively short period of time, Bob does not seem to have this experience as is laid out by these pictures. Of course, one of the things that you have to take into consideration when somebody talks about gaining 30 pounds in a cycle is that they never keep 30 pounds. They put on 30 pounds and they keep 7 pounds or 10 pounds or maybe 15 pounds. So a lot of that is fluff and body fat and water, and then they lose it and it's not anything that they can maintain or keep. From what we see, Bob's experience is very different, even with two very wet compounds, two aromatizable compounds, well, not Deca. Obviously the Deca has prolactin and progesterone type effects. The testosterone is going to aromatize, and so here we see that you can in fact get very athletic gains with wet compounds, presumably if you watch your diet and or are, I guess, genetically gifted or just genetically wired in that way, and Bob certainly seems to be that case. So there you go. That's what I wanted to do, is just make a short video, which has obviously not been short now, to show you at least what Bob's experience from this particular cycle was. Bob did go on to do several other cycles after this one, and so there will be more videos in this series, Bob Does Steroids, talking about some of those other cycles. Drugs including Anavar, NPP, Trenbolone, the godfather of all drugs, which I'm sure many of you will be very excited to hear what Bob's experience with those compounds were, so please stay tuned. Subscribe so that you can get those when they come out. They should be coming out relatively soon. Please follow me on Instagram if you want to see my day-to-day antics. I've been trying to do a lot more with my Instagram, from fitness stuff to crazy goofy shit. So if you just want to see a picture into my personal life, follow me on Instagram. The link is on my main page and I will put it in the description below. I welcome all of your comments about what you think this cycle reflects. Were they good gains, shitty gains? Was the gear even real? What do you think? Comments in the section below, and we'll see you on the next one.